Have you ever heard of a desert coming back to life? I mean, truly being transformed from barren sand back into a living, breathing ecosystem. Well, that's exactly what we're diving into today. An almost unbelievable story about one of China's largest deserts and the wild, radical vision that saved it. And it all kicks off with a really strange question. We usually think of rabbits as pests, right? As these furry little creatures capable of destroying a landscape. So how on earth could nearly 5 million of them be the secret weapon to saving a massive desert? It just sounds completely backward. And this really gets to the heart of the paradox. On one hand, you have Australia. Just 24 rabbits were introduced there, and they exploded into a population of over 1 billion, causing one of the worst ecological catastrophes in modern history. But on the other hand, in China's Kubiki Desert, they're seen as heroes. So what's the deal? Why the huge difference? Well, it all comes down to control. In Australia, the rabbits just went wild. No predators, nothing to stop them. But in Kubiki, this was a totally different ballgame. This was a carefully managed, closed system. It wasn't an invasion, it was a strategic deployment. And to understand why it was so desperately needed, you have to get a sense of just how big the problem was. So before we get to the solution, let's really understand the problem. Because this wasn't just a patch of sand we're talking about. This was an advancing, life-swallowing force of nature. Okay, so the Kubiki Desert is immense. It's the 7th largest in China, about the size of the entire state of Massachusetts. The climate is just brutal, swinging from freezing winters down to -4 degrees Fahrenheit, all the way to blistering hot summers. For years, it was just growing, literally burying entire villages and farms under sand dunes that could be up to 200 feet high. The government tried everything they could think of, planting windbreak forests, banning grazing, but nothing worked. For decades, the desert just kept winning. It was looking hopeless. But then it took one person with a completely radical vision and a really deep personal connection to the land to completely change the game. And that person was Wang Wenbao. Now, he wasn't some wealthy CEO or a high-ranking government official. Nope. He was a former teacher from Inner Mongolia who literally had to bike through the sand every single day just to get to his class. He knew the struggle firsthand, believe me. And this quote from him, man, it just perfectly captures his whole philosophy. He decided that if he was stuck with the desert, he was going to turn it from this huge liability into an asset. This wasn't just about stopping the sand anymore. It was about building a whole new kind of economy right on top of it. All right, so this is where the plan gets truly ingenious. He came up with a self-sustaining system, an ecological engine, powered by two of the most unlikely partners you can imagine. So the choice of rabbit was absolutely critical. These were not just any old rabbits. They were French-bred Rex rabbits. Their fur is nicknamed white gold because it's so valuable. They're also unbelievable breeders, and they're tough enough to survive the desert's crazy temperatures. They were basically a perfect little economic engine in a furry package. But the rabbits were only half of the equation. This slide here shows the elegant, beautiful, closed-loop system he created. It's so simple, it's brilliant. First, young willow trees provide food and shade for the rabbits. Then, the rabbits produce tons of manure, which happens to be super rich in nitrogen and potassium, exactly what the desert sand lacks. That manure turns the sand into actual fertile soil, which, in turn, helps more willows grow. You see, it's a perfect self-reinforcing cycle. And we absolutely can't forget the silent hero of this whole story, the willow tree. Its root system is just incredible. It can dig down over 300 feet to find hidden underground water. And this is key, it anchors those shifting sand dunes right in place. Without the willow, none of this would have been possible. But this little biological engine wasn't just about planting a few trees here and there. The goal was always to scale it up into a massive, profitable, and genuinely life-changing eco-economy. And scale it up, he did. Just try to wrap your mind around this number. Over 300 million willow trees were planted. This created a giant green wall that now holds back an estimated 15 million tons of sand from advancing every single year. It's just incredible. And the economic results? Just as staggering. From the rabbit pelts and meat to tourism and other businesses that popped up, this new green economy generated an incredible $10 billion in revenue in just the decade between 2010 and 2020. And you know, beyond all the environmental and economic wins, there was this profound human impact. The project lifted more than 10,000 families out of poverty. It allowed them to actually return to the homeland that the desert had once forced them to leave behind. But the innovation didn't stop there. Get this. This is the Juma Solar Power Plant, a massive installation with almost 200,000 solar panels arranged in the shape of a galloping horse. It doesn't just make clean energy. The panels provide crucial shade, which creates a microclimate underneath where grass can grow and animals can graze. It's a brilliant fusion of energy and agriculture. After decades of work, nature itself started to respond in a huge way. Wild animal populations have quadrupled. Groundwater levels have actually risen. Over 100 native plant species have just reappeared out of nowhere, and those vicious winds have been cut by 90%. The land is truly, and I mean truly, coming back to life. So the success is undeniable. But is this a miracle model that we can just copy and paste everywhere? Well, the project isn't without its critics, and it's important to look at that side of the story too. So some critics argue that the role of the rabbits has been a little bit exaggerated in the media. They say the real drivers were massive government investment and advanced land management technology, not just the simple cycle. There are also some very valid ecological concerns that, over the long term, too much rabbit manure could lead to nitrogen pollution in the soil and groundwater. But, despite those criticisms, the international community has absolutely taken notice. The United Nations has officially designated the Kubuki Project a global model for desertification control, and it's now seen as an international standard for sustainable development in these arid regions. And this story isn't staying in China. The core principles of the Kubuki model, creating these closed-loop ecological economies, are now being adapted to fight desertification all over the world, from Africa to a massive new restoration plan happening in southern Spain. Which brings us to our final thought. The Kubuki transformation proves that with real ingenuity and a willingness to work with nature instead of against it, even the most damaged landscapes can be restored. And it really begs the question, right? If we can make a desert bloom, what other seemingly impossible environmental challenges can we solve?